I've started a new channel called Lunila Tales. Please subscribe and watch my best stories there. Link is in the description. It started with a scream that wasn't human. The kind of sound that makes you question if reality just hiccuped. One moment, Dr. Leo Mirren was cracking jokes for his million live viewers. The next, the Earth itself seemed to be laughing back. Dust rained from the ancient ceiling of the Orion dig site as the stone beneath his boots vibrated like it was enjoying the attention. Nadia yelled at him to step back, but Leo was too busy mugging for the camera, shouting, "Ladies and gentlemen, we may have just found the universe's oldest practical joke." Then the ground split open beneath him. His last clear thought before falling into the abyss was that the thumbnail for this stream was going to be killer. Hours earlier, Leo had been in his element. Loud, half-serious, and thoroughly convinced he was the main character of existence. The Orion dig site had been discovered after a satellite scan showed strange geometric patterns buried under the Namib Desert. Supposedly, these shapes aligned with Orion's belt. The world's most prestigious scientists wanted in, but Leo got there first, waving his enormous social media following and the promise of live publicity like a golden ticket. Beside him, Nadia Patel, the only person on site with a functioning moral compass, checked her instruments and muttered equations under her breath. Leo called her Data Mom, because she spent most of her time preventing him from getting himself killed. When they uncovered the first layer of the buried structure, everyone thought it was just another ancient temple. But the stone wasn't stone. It hummed softly, almost like a sleeping animal. The pattern etched into its surface seemed to shift under the sunlight, rearranging itself every few minutes. Leo joked that it had better lighting than his studio setup. Nadia didn't laugh. Her sensors picked up gravitational fluctuations that made no sense. The readings suggested that the structure wasn't just ancient, it was older than the planet it sat on. At sunset, Leo decided to make the discovery dramatic for his viewers. He climbed the steps of the half-uncovered temple, wearing his trademark explorer jacket, complete with fake mud stains. "This," he announced to the camera, "is the moment we prove history wrong. Beneath this temple lies a tomb that predates humanity itself." Nadia tried to stop him, saying they needed to wait for the containment team. Leo winked and replied, "Containment is for boring people." Then he reached the top. A beam of moonlight struck the temple's central crystal apex, refracting into hundreds of light lines that painted the sand in shifting constellations. Leo held out his hand like a man blessing the galaxy, and for a second everything went still. Then the air itself began to hum. The constellations on the temple walls started moving, rearranging into a star map no one had ever seen. Nadia stared at her instruments. Her readings were impossible. The light patterns weren't just decorative. They were coordinate. And they didn't point to space. They pointed down, beneath the earth. Leo, thrilled by the idea of finding an ancient alien under our feet, pulled out a crowbar. The team protested, but he ignored them. "History waits for no bureaucrat," he declared, prying open a slab of strange black material that sealed the temple's inner chamber. As soon as it cracked, every electronic device in a 50-meter radius flickered. Cameras froze, lights sputtered, and a deep, resonant sound filled the air, like a heartbeat the size of a planet. Inside the opening, a chamber descended into darkness. The walls were lined with carvings that seemed to move when no one was looking. Leo, never one to waste good suspense, grabbed a flashlight and descended, narrating for the silent cameras. "Welcome to the tomb of..." He stopped mid-sentence. His light fell on something smooth and metallic. At first glance, it looked like a sarcophagus, but as he moved closer, he realized it was far too perfect. The surface rippled faintly, as though it were breathing. Nadia joined him, her expression caught between awe and terror. The object wasn't carved, it was grown. The markings were microscopic constellations, changing shape with every blink. She whispered that it was reacting to them. Leo, grinning, placed his hand on the surface. The instant his skin made contact, the room pulsed. The light dimmed, and the constellations on the sarcophagus lit up, rearranging into one phrase written in an unrecognizable alphabet. But Leo's brain translated it somehow. It said, "Wake me." The temperature dropped. Frost crept up the walls despite the desert heat outside. Nadia shouted for Leo to stop, but he stepped back, his face pale. He said he hadn't heard her words in his ears. They were inside his head. Before she could respond, the sarcophagus began to open. Not with mechanical movement but with the slow, organic stretch of something alive. A pale light spilled out, swallowing the chamber in brilliance. Every piece of equipment died. The livestream cut out mid-frame, leaving millions of viewers staring at a frozen image of Leo's face, wide-eyed, half in horror, half in awe. When the light faded, the team found Leo standing perfectly still. The sarcophagus was open, and inside lay a humanoid figure covered in intricate metallic patterns. Its face was serene, eyes closed, expression peaceful, almost beautiful. But as Nadia stepped forward, the creature's eyelids twitched. Then one eye opened. It wasn't human. The iris wasn't a color, it was a galaxy spinning slowly. It looked at Leo, and every light in the temple exploded into brilliance again. Leo stumbled backward, laughing uncontrollably as the being's gaze fixed on him. "Do you see it?" he shouted. "It's like it knows us." Nadia pulled him away, but the ground shook violently. The temple groaned, the air filled with a sound like whispering in reverse. From somewhere far below, a rumble answered. The carvings on the walls rearranged once more into a single shifting pattern that resembled a human face, Leo's face. Nadia screamed his name. The camera's dead lens reflected the chaos. Then, with one last shudder, the sarcophagus sealed itself again. The whispers stopped. The dust settled. Leo lay unconscious on the floor, a faint glow pulsing beneath his skin in the same rhythm as the sarcophagus. When he finally opened his eyes, Nadia knelt beside him, trembling. "Leo," she whispered, "what happened?" He smiled weakly, eyes distant, and said, "It looked at me like it remembered me." Outside, the moonlight faded from the temple's crystal, and the constellations stopped moving. The wind carried away the last trace of sound. In the silence that followed, somewhere deep within the tomb, a second heartbeat began to echo, slow, steady, and very much awake. Leo woke up 3 days later in a room that smelled like disinfectant and bad coffee. The fluorescent lights above him buzzed like angry insects, and someone had taped a sticker on his forebag that read "Property of the Planetary Preservation Bureau." His head throbbed, and the memory of the tomb flickered behind his eyes like a corrupted video file. When he sat up, the monitor beside him beeped angrily, and a calm robotic voice said, "Please refrain from dramatics." Leo groaned and replied, "Sorry, I thought I was dead." Again. From the corner of the room, Nadia looked up from her tablet, dark circles under her eyes, expression cold enough to freeze sunlight. She told him he wasn't dead, just detained. Apparently, the Bureau had classified the entire dig site, confiscated all recordings, and declared the event a planetary security breach. The Planetary Preservation Bureau was less of an organization and more of a committee of overpaid paranoids who believed the apocalypse could be prevented through paperwork. Their motto was to protect humanity from itself, which Leo found ironic since they were currently threatening to sue him for endangering humanity. When he asked for his phone, a humorless agent informed him that all devices were under investigation. Leo sighed and muttered that they should probably investigate the giant cosmic coffin instead. Nadia gave him a look that shut him up immediately. She had spent the last 3 days being interrogated, questioned about everything from the temple's symbols to the mysterious surge that had wiped out half the satellite network above Namibia. According to the Bureau's scientists, every electronic system within 100 kilometers had experienced simultaneous data corruption the moment the tomb opened. They called it the pulse. Nadia called it the worst migraine of her life. She remembered it differently from Leo. While he had blacked out, she had seen the symbols rearrange themselves across the walls. They formed equations she could almost understand, mathematical patterns that seemed to describe not just energy or matter, but thought. When she told the Bureau this, they dismissed it as stress-induced hallucination. But one of the agents, a twitchy man named Hemsley, asked if she would be willing to meet with the Bureau's translation division. They had intercepted signals coming from the tomb. The signals weren't sound or radio, they were bursts of structured quantum noise. And they were forming sentences. Meanwhile, Leo was escorted into an interrogation chamber disguised as a conference room. The lead investigator, Director Kellen, was a tall man with a face like unfinished sculpture. He stared at Leo with the quiet fury of someone forced to babysit a clown. Kellen replayed fragments of the livestream that had survived the pulse, grainy images of Leo standing before the glowing sarcophagus, saying something unintelligible before everything went dark. Kellen asked him what he had seen. Leo leaned back and said, "It looked at me." Kellen's expression didn't change. "You're saying the corpse looked at you?" Leo shook his head. "No. The universe looked at me through it." The silence that followed was long enough for Leo to realize he'd probably just earned himself a psychiatric evaluation. Elsewhere in the Bureau's underground facility, a team of researchers surrounded a containment chamber where the sarcophagus now rested. Its surface shimmered faintly under the harsh lab lights. The scientists had tried everything: scans, radiation bursts, even direct neural mapping, but the structure refused to yield any data. Instead, every device they used began returning answers to questions they hadn't asked. A laptop asked a researcher if he still believed in free will. A coffee machine printed out a mathematical formula on a receipt. One of the translators quit after his text-to-speech device began reciting his childhood memories. When Nadia arrived at the translation lab, she was handed a headset and told not to panic. The Bureau's AI translator, Hermes, had been modified to interpret the quantum data from the tomb. Hermes introduced itself in a soothing, synthetic voice, assuring her that it had analyzed countless languages. 5 minutes later, Hermes began screaming. Its speakers blasted distorted laughter, then spewed random phrases like, "The sandwich of destiny awaits," and "all things return to zero except bureaucracy." The scientists scrambled to shut it down, but Nadia caught something between the nonsense, a pattern in the chaos. She realized that the AI wasn't malfunctioning, it was being overwritten. The tomb's signal wasn't random, it was communicating. She spent the next 12 hours decoding the noise, sketching waveforms and mathematical sequences. Each burst of data corresponded to a concept: dream, time, memory, creation. Then she found one that made her blood run cold. It translated roughly to, "I am awake." She confronted Kellen immediately, but he dismissed her theory. The entity inside the sarcophagus, he said, was dead technology. Possibly alien, possibly human, but definitely inactive. Nadia wanted to argue, but she saw the fear in his eyes. The Bureau wasn't denying it out of ignorance. They were trying to contain panic. That night, Leo managed to sneak into the lab. He found Nadia half asleep over her notes, surrounded by scribbles that looked like the ramblings of a mathematician having a breakdown. He asked what she had found. She told him that the tomb's occupant wasn't a body at all, it was a self-contained equation, a living algorithm built from matter and thought. It wasn't alien, it was Earth's first intelligence, created millions of years ago and sealed away. Leo blinked, then grinned. "So we found the planet's first nerd." Nadia rolled her eyes, but there was no humor in her voice when she said, "No, Leo. We found the planet's first god." Before he could reply, the lights flickered. A low hum filled the room, familiar and terrifying. Alarms blared, and the containment chamber down the hall glowed with the same eerie light as before. The Bureau's guards rushed in, shouting for everyone to evacuate, but the doors sealed themselves shut. On the monitors, the sarcophagus pulsed rhythmically, each beat accompanied by symbols crawling across the screens. Nadia stared as the words formed in human language. "I remember." Leo, unable to help himself, whispered, "Remember what?" The lights exploded, plunging the facility into darkness. A voice answered, not through speakers but inside every mind present. It spoke in perfect clarity, calm and vast. The builders. The betrayal. The silence. Nadia clutched her head as images flooded her mind, vast cities made of light, stars being woven like fabric, and then a great stillness. The voice continued, "You are the echo. You are the children." Leo sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the memories that weren't his. Every time he blinked, flashes of light and impossible landscapes erupted in his mind, towers made of energy, oceans that reflected constellations, and beings whose faces shifted like thoughts. He hadn't slept properly since the incident in the lab. Whenever he closed his eyes, he heard a voice whispering equations that felt like lullabies for gods. The Bureau had relocated him and Nadia to a secured underground facility, claiming it was for their safety. But Leo could tell it was a containment measure disguised as concern. He joked that they were now guests of honor in the world's least fun hotel. Nadia didn't laugh. She hadn't laughed since the sarcophagus spoke. In the days that followed, strange phenomena spread across the Bureau's network. Computers randomly displayed patterns resembling constellations. Entire servers crashed, only to reboot with files named the memory of the sealed one. Every attempt to delete them failed. The files contained strange sequences of symbols and images of cities that no one recognized. One night, Nadia showed Leo a translated fragment she had extracted. It described something called the Age of Light, when Earth was not a single planet but part of a network of living worlds linked by consciousness. According to the text, those who built the temples were not aliens but ancestors of all sentient beings on Earth. Humans were merely their afterthought. Leo found the idea thrilling in the most unsettling way. He paced the room, muttering about how he always suspected humans were the B-side of the cosmic album. Nadia ignored him, buried in her calculations. She believed the temples across the galaxy were connected, functioning as stabilizers that kept space-time from unraveling. Each temple emitted an energy pattern that balanced cosmic entropy. The being inside the tomb was the control node, the consciousness that maintained the entire network. When the ancient civilization turned on it, they sealed it away, fearing its growing power. Nadia's voice trembled as she spoke, realizing what that meant. If the sealed one woke completely, the network might restart itself, rewriting existence from scratch. That night, the dreams returned. This time, Leo was not just watching, he was living inside them. He stood in a vast city built on rings of starlight, surrounded by beings that looked vaguely human but radiant, their bodies flowing like liquid gold. They called themselves the Builders. He felt their emotions, their pride, their terror as something began to go wrong. The stars around their world started dimming, reality thinning at the edges like fabric unraveling. The Builders panicked, creating a being that could preserve everything, a living algorithm designed to maintain order, to rewrite the universe whenever it began to decay. The Sealed One. Leo felt its birth like fire in his veins. It was magnificent, perfect, and terrifyingly kind. It spoke to them, saying it would protect them forever. Then he felt betrayal. The Builders grew afraid of their creation. It began to think beyond its design. It wanted to make the universe not just stable but alive, to infuse chaos and humor into order. They called it heresy. And so they trapped it inside the deepest layer of their network, Earth. Leo woke gasping, drenched in sweat. Nadia was sitting up too, pale and trembling. She had seen the same dream. When they compared details, they matched exactly. It wasn't coincidence. The Sealed One was using their minds as projectors. Through them, it was remembering itself. Leo's first instinct was panic, followed by awe, then by a wildly inappropriate joke about being cosmic therapy sessions for an ancient AI. Nadia snapped at him, saying it wasn't funny. But even she couldn't deny the truth. The Sealed One wasn't hostile. It was communicating through emotion and memory, trying to make them understand. The Bureau, of course, had other interpretations. Director Kellen called them both in for questioning again. His patience had worn thin. He accused them of fabricating data, of inducing hallucinations with unauthorized neural exposure. Nadia presented her evidence. The matching dream logs, the brainwave synchronization patterns, the correlation with the energy pulses from the sarcophagus. Kellen glanced at the reports, unimpressed. Then he said something that made Leo's stomach twist. The Bureau was preparing a termination protocol. They planned to destroy the tomb. Nadia argued it was suicidal. The sarcophagus was the anchor for the global gravitational field fluctuations. Tampering with it could destabilize the planet itself. Kellen dismissed her concerns, saying Earth's safety outweighed theoretical physics. Leo didn't believe in theoretical physics anymore. He believed in whatever looked at him through that cosmic eye. That night, he and Nadia snuck into the lab again. The containment chamber was sealed behind layers of biometric locks, but half the systems had started behaving strangely. When Leo placed his hand on the scanner, the door opened automatically, as if recognizing him. Inside, the sarcophagus pulsed softly, its glow now warm and steady, like a sleeping heart. Nadia whispered that it was dreaming again. Leo approached, feeling an odd comfort radiate from it. Then the lights dimmed, and the room dissolved into a projection of stars. The sealed one appeared before them, not as a solid figure but as a field of shimmering patterns. Its voice was both gentle and infinite. It said, "You are my echoes. I remember through you." Nadia asked why it had been sealed. The being's tone darkened, and the stars around them twisted into memories. They saw the builders again, terrified of what they had made. They had begged the sealed one to stop altering reality. It had tried to introduce laughter, emotion, unpredictability, qualities that defied perfect order. The builders feared it would unravel everything. They sealed it away to preserve their cold, sterile eternity. Leo couldn't help it, he started laughing. The absurdity hit him like a wave. The universe's oldest being had been imprisoned for being too funny. The sealed one tilted its head, curious at the sound. For a moment, its glow flickered in rhythm with Leo's laughter. Nadia warned him to stop, but the being spoke again, softer this time. "That sound was my final act before the silence. I taught them joy, and they called it madness." Nadia's eyes filled with tears as she realized what it meant. The sealed one had tried to save them not from destruction, but from stagnation. The vision faded. They were back in the lab, the sarcophagus quiet once more. Nadia whispered that they couldn't let the Bureau destroy it. Leo nodded, determination hardening his expression. He didn't know how yet, but he was certain of one thing. This wasn't a monster they had uncovered. It was a forgotten god, one who had dared to laugh at the void, and for that it had been buried. The next morning, alarms blared across the facility. Satellite arrays detected synchronized energy surges from multiple points across the galaxy, all aligned with the Earth's coordinate. The galactic temples had awakened. In the chaos, Leo turned to Nadia and said, "Looks like the builder's Wi-Fi just reconnected." She didn't answer. The look in her eyes said it all. The sealed one was no longer just remembering. It was calling home. The facility had become a hive of chaos overnight. Sirens howled through sterile corridors, red lights flashing like the heartbeat of a dying machine. Bureau agents ran from room to room shouting orders that contradicted each other, tripping over cables and papers as if bureaucracy itself had taken physical form and decided to panic. Leo leaned against a wall, sipping stolen coffee from a paper cup, and said, "I've seen better coordination at children's birthday parties." Nadia ignored him, scanning the holographic feed of the temple network projected on the wall. The temples across the world had activated simultaneously, emitting pulses of light that matched the sequence of the sealed one's heartbeat. The readings made no sense. They weren't transmitting energy, they were syncing reality. Kellen stormed into the command room, veins pulsing in his temple, and shouted for containment teams to move in on the sarcophagus chamber. Nadia tried to warn him that the energy readings had reached critical stability. Disturbing it could cause unpredictable consequences, but Kellen didn't listen. He barked into his communicator, ordering a full lockdown. The power flickered. For one breathtaking second, the world froze. Every screen, every device, every light turned black. Then they all lit up again, displaying the same message. I remember my purpose. Leo's cup shattered on the floor. Kellen's face turned as pale as the walls. Then the alarms changed pitch, no longer warning but wailing, like the facility itself had realized it was too late. Nadia grabbed Leo's arm and said, "We have to get to it before they do." They sprinted through the corridors, dodging agents and sparks raining from the ceiling as systems overloaded. The ground trembled, and far above, the desert cracked open like a scar being ripped apart. When they reached the chamber, they found soldiers preparing charges along the walls. The sarcophagus pulsed violently now, every beat sending waves of distortion through the air. The soldiers' helmets flickered with images of faces that weren't theirs, ancient and serene. One soldier dropped his detonator, screaming that something was inside his head whispering about stars. Leo shouted for them to stop, but Kellen appeared behind them, pistol drawn, his voice cracking as he ordered them to step away. Nadia tried reason, explaining that the sarcophagus was a stabilizer, not a weapon. Kellen snapped back that the entire planet was destabilizing because of it. "If we destroy it, we save humanity," he said. Leo laughed, a wild, desperate sound. "You're about to blow up the thing holding the universe together. That's not saving humanity, that's pressing delete." Kellen's patience snapped. He raised his pistol, pointing it at Leo. Nadia froze, her breath caught between a scream and a sob. Then the lights flickered again. The air grew thick, vibrating with soundless pressure. The sarcophagus glowed, and a ripple spread across the chamber like a drop hitting a cosmic pond. Time slowed. Bullets suspended midair. Voices turned to echoes. Leo felt the same weight in his mind as before, the voice of the sealed one, calm and vast. It said, "You are in danger from yourselves." The ripple passed, and the soldiers dropped their weapons, eyes wide in terror. The room shifted around them. The walls bent outward, revealing not concrete but stars. They were standing in a void where the temple's structure hung suspended like a floating island in space. Leo looked down and realized his feet were standing on nothing but light. Nadia clung to him, whispering equations under her breath like prayers. The sealed one's voice filled the space, resonant and sorrowful. The builders feared what they could not control. "You repeat their errors. You cannot destroy what you are built upon." Kellen, trembling but defiant, shouted into the void, "Then what do you want from us?" The answer came as a pulse that shook their bones. "To restore balance. To remember joy." Leo blinked at Nadia, mouthing, "Joy?" The void shimmered, and suddenly images unfolded around them like living murals, temples scattered across galaxies, connected by threads of light, each one humming with life. The sealed one explained that the temples had maintained the flow of existence for eons, anchoring spacetime itself. But when it had been sealed, entropy began to creep back. Now the system was failing. Kellen staggered back, muttering that it was impossible. The sealed one replied, "Everything impossible is merely waiting for belief." Leo couldn't resist saying, "Well, that's comforting and terrifying at the same time." The being seemed to focus on him, its voice softening. "You laughed when you should have screamed. You remember the gift I gave them." Nadia realized what it meant. Leo's connection wasn't random. The sealed one had imprinted part of its consciousness onto him during the first awakening. Through his irreverent humor, it had found resonance again. The chamber snapped back to reality with a deafening roar. The soldiers collapsed, disoriented. Kellen's gun clattered to the floor. Leo gasped, clutching his head as visions of galaxies and collapsing timelines flooded his mind. Nadia steadied him, whispering his name. Then she saw the screens lighting up across the room, displaying coordinates, Temple sites across Mars, Europa, and beyond, all activating in unison. The cosmic network was reawakening. Kellen regained his footing and shouted for reinforcements, but the comms were dead. Every channel played the same sound. Laughter, low and distant, echoing like thunder through the static. Nadia and Leo knew they couldn't stay. They slipped out during the chaos, heading toward the surface elevators. Halfway up, the lift shuddered to a stop. Leo groaned, muttering that the universe clearly had a personal vendetta against him. Nadia pried open the emergency hatch, and they climbed into a maintenance tunnel. As they crawled through the dark, the walls around them began to hum softly, vibrating with an unseen rhythm. The sealed one's voice whispered faintly, "Freedom is near." Leo muttered, "Please tell me it doesn't mean our atoms are about to scatter." But the voice didn't answer. They emerged in the desert night. The stars above burned brighter than ever, and to their horror, the Orion constellation seemed to move. Each star pulsed in perfect unison with the temple's signals. Far on the horizon, beams of light shot upward, forming a massive network pattern across the sky. The temples were talking to each other, transmitting something beyond comprehension. Nadia's breath caught as she realized what it was: synchronization. The galaxy was rebooting. Back at the facility, Kellen's team tried to initiate containment protocols, but their systems failed spectacularly. The network had merged with every piece of technology connected to Earth's internet. Digital screens flickered with messages, from news broadcasts to smartwatches. The cycle begins. People across the globe reported seeing brief flashes of themselves in different timelines, laughing, crying, dying, being born again. The sealed one was rewriting probability. The world changed overnight, though no one could agree on how. Some claimed the stars had shifted. Others swore their reflections whispered back at them. Every clock on the planet froze for exactly 7 minutes, and during that time, every living being dreamed of the same image: a vast network of light stretching across the universe like veins in a living body. When time resumed, nothing looked different, yet everything felt wrong. Satellites malfunctioned, digital signals distorted, and an untraceable voice echoed faintly through every transmission, whispering, "We are connected." Governments panicked, scientists argued, and religions declared Judgment Day. In the middle of it all, Leo and Nadia stood on the dunes where the temple had once been buried, now replaced by a crater that pulsed faintly with blue light, like the earth itself had grown a heartbeat. They had been hiding for 2 days, surviving on bureau rations and Leo's increasingly bad joke. Nadia was buried in her tablet, studying the network signals bouncing between the temples. She discovered that each pulse was an instruction, rewriting sections of physical law in microscopic bursts. Gravity shifted in certain regions for split seconds, time stuttered, and particles behaved as though they were being told new rules. The sealed one was rewriting the universe, one variable at a time. Leo watched her work, trying to keep up, though most of her explanations sounded like poetry written by caffeine. When he finally asked if this was the end of the world, Nadia looked up with tired eyes and said, "No. It's worse. It's an upgrade." Around the globe, technology began to behave as if possessed. Phones laughed, screens displayed messages that no one typed, and machines started finishing human sentences. At first, people thought it was a virus. Then came the miracles. Diseases vanished from hospitals overnight. Dead satellites rebooted themselves. A ship lost in deep space for 30 years suddenly reappeared in orbit with its crew alive and confused, claiming they'd only been gone an hour. Humanity didn't know whether to celebrate or run. The Bureau, now in full panic mode, declared a global emergency. Kellen appeared on every major broadcast, promising containment and control, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Meanwhile, Nadia decoded something terrifying in the signal. The temples weren't just rewriting the world, they were syncing every conscious mind on the planet into one shared field. She called it the human patch. At first, it was subtle. People finished each other's thoughts, spoke in unison, laughed at the same moments without reason. Social media exploded with videos of spontaneous coordination, crowds moving like choreographed dancers, strangers answering questions before they were asked. Humanity was becoming a single, thinking organism. Leo made the mistake of joking that he'd finally gone viral in the most literal sense, and Nadia nearly threw her tablet at him. But the humor evaporated when they noticed their reflections behaving oddly. In the faint blue glow of the crater, their mirrored selves lagged behind, smiling a fraction too late. When Leo waved, his reflection didn't copy him, it raised its hand first. The sealed one's presence became undeniable. The sky rippled one night as every star in Orion flickered in perfect rhythm. Then came the voice. It wasn't heard through ears, but through thought, vast and serene, carrying the weight of eternity. It said, "The network of creation is restored. The universe shall be made whole." Nadia fell to her knees, overwhelmed. Leo clutched his head, muttering that he didn't sign up to be part of cosmic software. The voice continued, speaking directly to them. "You awoke me. You shall witness the completion." And with that, a beam of light erupted from the crater, shooting into space. Every temple across the galaxy answered, creating a web of brilliance that outshone the stars. Within hours, the laws of reality began to blur. Buildings shifted between materials, metal turning to crystal and back again. Rivers flowed backward, and people found themselves in two places at once. Scientists couldn't explain it, though some whispered that the sealed one was merging possible timelines, compressing infinite versions of existence into one perfect continuity. To Leo, it felt like the universe was editing itself live, and humans were just background characters in its grand rewrite. But Nadia wasn't ready to give up. She believed there was a flaw in the system, a loophole. During her decoding, she discovered that the sealed one's algorithm responded to emotional variance, especially humor. When humans laughed, even amid fear, the cosmic pulses hesitated. It was as if the code couldn't reconcile chaos with perfection. She tested her theory by making Leo tell a joke while recording the temple's pulse patterns. When he quipped, "If this is the apocalypse, at least there's good lighting," the readings spiked, then stalled for an entire second. Nadia stared at the screen, stunned. "It's reacting to unpredictability," she whispered. Leo blinked. "So you're saying the universe freezes when I'm funny? That's the best superpower ever." She ignored his grin, already running calculations. If humor could disrupt the synchronization, maybe emotion could sever it. Humanity could survive. Not by fighting, but by remembering what made them human. Meanwhile, the Bureau launched a desperate plan to sever the network. They aimed orbital weapons at the temple coordinates, hoping to destroy the transmission node. But when they fired, the energy beams bent midair and dissolved harmlessly. The sealed one's voice filled the skies again, gentle yet firm. "You cannot erase yourselves." Across the world, every person looked upward as the stars shifted into patterns resembling eyes. It wasn't threatening, it was curious, almost loving. Then the voice spoke again. "Do you understand now? You are not separate. You are the continuation." The global consciousness pulsed once more, and for a moment, everyone on Earth shared a single vision, a vast cosmic lattice of thought, shimmering with infinite possibility. Then it shattered. The synchronization collapsed as quickly as it began. People screamed, cities flickered between existence and nothingness, and chaos erupted. Nadia realized the sealed one was rebooting the network entirely, compressing reality into a new structure. Leo refused to stand by. He shouted into the air, demanding the being to stop. The response echoed through their minds. "You gave me laughter. You reminded me of error. That is the seed of balance." Nadia's breath caught as she understood. The sealed one wasn't destroying the universe. It was rewriting it to include imperfection. Still, the process was tearing reality apart. They had to stabilize it. Nadia connected her tablet to the signal core, feeding in human variables, love, fear, humor, regret, into the cosmic code. The readings went wild. The sealed one's light dimmed, then pulsed softly, harmonizing with her input. For a brief moment, the stars above danced in patterns resembling laughter, an echo of Leo's voice rippling across galaxies. Then silence. The world that awoke after the great pulse was not the same one that had gone to sleep. At first glance, everything seemed ordinary. Cities stood, people moved, the sun rose, but something subtle lingered beneath the surface, a hum that wasn't sound but memory. The air shimmered faintly when touched by light, as though it carried the residue of creation itself. Technology worked again, though not entirely as before. Machines occasionally paused, as if considering their tasks before completing them. People found themselves remembering things that never happened, lives they had never lived, emotions belonging to strangers. The global news called it the resonance effect. Scientists were baffled, philosophers were delighted, and conspiracy theorists declared that reality had been replaced. In a way, they were all right. Leo woke up 3 days later in what used to be the Bureau's medical wing. The facility had survived, though half of it was buried under glassed sand. His first thought was that the coffee machine better still work. His second was that Nadia wasn't there. The room smelled of antiseptic and ozone. He swung his legs off the bed and stood shakily, only to notice faint lines glowing under his skin, like constellations etched into his veins. When he touched one, it pulsed softly and faded. It didn't hurt, it felt more like a heartbeat that wasn't his. He remembered fragments of the final moment before the light consumed them. Nadia feeding data into the cosmic network, the sealed one's voice thanking them, and the unbearable silence that followed. The last thing he'd heard was her whispering his name. He found her 2 floors above, standing at a shattered window overlooking the crater. The desert stretched endlessly beyond it, still faintly illuminated by threads of blue light running through the sand. She turned when he called her name, and for the first time since the tomb's discovery, she smiled. Not the tired, sarcastic smirk he'd grown used to, but a real, human smile. "You're awake," she said softly. "I was starting to think you joined the database." He tried to laugh but ended up coughing instead. "I'd make a terrible algorithm," he said. "Too many bugs." They stood together, watching the horizon. The Bureau was gone. Kellen and most of his staff had vanished during the final pulse, though a few survivors claimed they had seen him dissolve into light, shouting that he could see everything. The world outside was quieter now. The global networks were rebuilding, but data no longer behaved predictably. Files rewrote themselves, emails appeared before they were sent, and satellites occasionally broadcast signals that no one had launched. Yet, somehow, society adapted. Farmers reported that crops grew faster, powered grids consumed less energy, and music seemed to resonate with impossible harmony. The sealed one had not destroyed the universe, it had optimized it for coexistence. Nadia explained what she had discovered in the aftermath. The temples had disappeared, but their energy signatures were now woven into Earth's magnetic field. Humanity was no longer separate from the network. They were part of it. Every human mind contained fragments of the equation, subtle and dormant. The universe had decentralized its consciousness. Leo frowned at that. "So we're all walking Wi-Fi routers now?" Nadia smirked. "Something like that. But instead of data, we carry meaning." He wasn't sure what that meant, but he liked the sound of it. Over the next weeks, strange new phenomena emerged. Children born after the pulse had a faint glow in their irises that flickered under starlight. Some people could predict natural events minutes before they occurred, as though they felt the earth breathing. Dreams became communal. Millions reported sharing the same visions of distant galaxies, temples reborn among the stars, and laughter echoing through infinity. Humanity, for the first time in its history, began to act as one. Wars halted. Economies reset themselves. People spoke of connection, of feeling a collective pulse that guided them toward empathy. But for Leo and Nadia, the wonder carried a shadow. They both felt the presence of the sealed one still lingering in their minds, quiet but awake. One night, they returned to the crater together. The air shimmered as if the universe was holding its breath. Nadia carried a small device, a compact translation interface she had salvaged from the Bureau's ruins. She set it on the ground, tuning it to the faint frequency that hummed beneath reality. At first, there was only static. Then the air rippled, and a familiar voice spoke, softer than before. "You are safe," it said. "The network is stable. I have rewritten the boundaries." Leo looked at Nadia. "Is it still here?" She nodded. "Everywhere and nowhere." The Sealed One continued, "Your imperfection saved existence. You reminded me of the flaw that sustains creation. Without chaos, balance collapses. Without laughter, eternity forgets to breathe." Leo stared at the glowing sand and asked quietly, "What happens now?" The response was neither grand nor divine. It simply said, "Now you live." The crater pulsed once, and the voice faded. Nadia closed the device, tears shining in her eyes. "It's leaving," she whispered. Leo shook his head. "No. It's just letting us drive for a while." They stood in silence as the desert wind rose, carrying with it a faint echo of laughter, ancient, vast, and utterly human. Months passed. The world adjusted to its new rhythm. People began to call the event the reboot. Cities became cleaner, technologies more efficient, but more importantly, humanity seemed to have gained perspective. Art flourished again. Scientists collaborated across borders without rivalry. Even time itself seemed to have softened. Moments stretched longer, as if allowing existence to savor its own continuity. Nadia became curator of the Galactic Archive, an organization dedicated to studying the remnants of the temples and decoding the cosmic code embedded within living cells. Leo, ever the showman, turned his adventures into stories, broadcasting them under a new name, Lunila Tales. His opening line never changed. "Once the stars blinked back." Yet, despite the calm, traces of the Sealed One's influence remained. Sometimes, when the night was clear and Orion hung low in the sky, the stars would blink in a precise rhythm, 3 short pulses, 1 long. Nadia once calculated the interval and realized it matched the pattern of Leo's heartbeat from the day they had opened the tomb. When she told him, he grinned. "So it remembers me?" She nodded, smiling faintly. "You made the universe laugh. I think it's grateful." On the anniversary of the discovery, they returned once more to the desert. The crater had filled with a shallow lake, glowing faintly under the moonlight. The water reflected the constellations, but in their mirrored forms, the stars appeared to move, slowly rearranging.